Jake had always thought he understood his place in the family. He had worked hard, taken on responsibilities, and been the backbone supporting his parents while his brother Eric did nothing. It seemed like the natural thing for him to do, no thanks or recognition needed. He never expected anything more, not until that day. That day, when he found the will. The cold, hard truth written in black and white shattered everything he thought he knew. His parents had chosen Eric, the lazy son who never contributed, to inherit everything. Jake, the one who had been keeping the family afloat, was left out completely. Jake had always been there, paying bills, handling chores, fixing things around the house while Eric lounged, carefree and irresponsible. Yet, somehow, it was Eric who was to inherit everything. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was the betrayal. The realization that all those years of sacrifice had been overlooked, while Eric was handed everything with no effort at all. But that was just the beginning. The real question is, what would Jake do after this moment of betrayal? Would he continue to be the family's safety net, or would he take control of his own life? And could he ever find peace in the wake of such a harsh betrayal? Jake sat at the kitchen table, the familiar smell of coffee filling the room as his father handed him a stack of papers. It was a normal Saturday afternoon, and Jake had been helping his dad with some paperwork for what felt like the 100th time. His parents were always asking for his help, whether it was fixing something around the house, paying bills, or dealing with things they didn't understand. And Jake had never minded. It was just part of being the responsible one in the family, the one who took care of everything when things needed to be done. But today was different. As Jake flipped through the papers, scanning the usual legal and financial documents, his eyes landed on something that immediately caught his attention, a folder labeled Estate Plan and Last Will and Testament. It was out of place. It wasn't part of the usual paperwork his dad asked him to go through. And even though Jake wasn't one to snoop, his curiosity got the better of him. After all, he had been the one putting in the effort all these years. Paying their mortgage, helping with groceries, fixing things around the house. Wasn't it only fair that he should know what was planned for him and his brother Eric when the time came? He opened the folder, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled out the will. As soon as his eyes scanned the first few lines, his stomach dropped. Everything was going to Eric. Jake could hardly believe what he was seeing. The house, their savings, their assets, all of it was being handed over to Eric, his brother who had contributed nothing. Not a penny to the bills, not a hand to help out with any of the housework. Eric had never held a job and spent most of his time lounging around, expecting life to hand him everything on a silver platter. And yet, it was Jake, the one who had kept the family afloat, who had made sure they didn't fall into financial ruin, who was completely left out. He stared at the page, his mind racing as the words blurred in front of him. There was no mention of him at all, except for some vague lines about how his parents loved both their sons equally. Yeah, right, his blood began to boil as the reality of the situation sank in. He had been the one paying the bills, keeping the house running, making sure there was food on the table. And now, it seemed that it was all for nothing. His parents had decided that Eric, the lazy, entitled son, deserved everything. Jake had been the one carrying the weight of the family, and yet he was the one who was left out of their plans entirely. How long had they been planning this? Jake thought to himself. Had they always intended for me to be their financial safety net, with nothing in return? His hands started to shake as he held up the will, his mind spinning with anger and betrayal. He wasn't sure how long he had been sitting there, but eventually, his dad walked into the room, oblivious to what had just transpired. Hey Jake, what's taking so long? His dad asked, looking over his shoulder at the pile of papers on the table. Jake didn't even bother to hide the will. He held it up, locking eyes with his father, his voice unnervingly calm despite the storm brewing inside him. So this is how it is? Jake asked, his tone ice cold. Everything goes to Eric? After everything I've done for you? His father's face went pale for a moment, his usual confidence faltering. But instead of addressing the hurt in Jake's eyes, his dad simply sighed, his expression turning dismissive. Jake, it's not what you think, his dad muttered, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Jake couldn't believe his ears. Not what I think? It looks pretty damn clear to me. I've been paying your mortgage, buying groceries, fixing up the house, and doing everything while Eric does nothing, and he's the one you want to give everything to. His father didn't seem to know how to respond. He just stood there, muttering something about how complicated it all was, offering no explanation, no apology, just those two useless words, complicated. Jake felt his blood pressure rise, his fists clenching as he fought to keep his composure. This was the man who had raised him? This was the man who had watched him work tirelessly to support the family, only to turn around and leave him out of the inheritance entirely? But there was something worse than the betrayal in that moment. It was the way his father was brushing it off. There was no accountability, no sense of appreciation for everything Jake had done. His father was simply hoping this would blow over. That Jake would drop it and go back to being the family's ATM, but Jake wasn't going to let that happen. "Dad, this isn't just about the money," Jake said, his voice steely. "This is about respect. I've given you everything, and you didn't even have the decency to acknowledge that." He couldn't hold it in any longer. The anger, the frustration, the years of being taken for granted. It all came pouring out in that moment. "Eric is lazy. He's entitled. He's never done a damn thing to help you, and yet you choose him over me." His dad's face shifted, unease settling in, but there was no apology. No explanation that could make this right. Jake's mind raced. He needed answers. He needed to hear it from both of them. With a deep breath, he called for his mom, knowing that things were about to get even more complicated. What would she say when she saw the will? Would she even care about what Jake had done for them, or was this just about Eric getting his way? The answer would come soon enough. Jake's mother walked into the room just as his dad shuffled awkwardly beside him, clearly avoiding eye contact. Her face softened when she saw the will in Jake's hand. But there was no apology, no regret, only a sense of discomfort. It was clear she wasn't surprised to see Jake holding it. Maybe she had known this moment was coming, or maybe it was just the reality of a situation that had been brewing for far too long. "Jake, honey," she said, her voice gentle but lacking the empathy he had hoped for. "You don't need the inheritance. You have a good job, you're independent." "Eric," she paused, looking at the will, and then glanced back at Jake. "Well, he struggles. We just want to make sure he's taken care of." Jake's heart sank further. His mom wasn't even pretending anymore. There was no attempt to explain, to justify, or to even acknowledge how much he had sacrificed for the family over the years. It was as if she was trying to convince herself that what they were doing was right, but Jake wasn't buying it. "So, that's it." Jake's voice came out flat, almost too calm for the storm inside of him. "You've decided that Eric is more important than me? After everything I've done, this is what I get." His mom took a step forward, her hand hovering near the table, but she didn't touch him. Her expression was a mixture of guilt and frustration, like she was on the defensive, trying to explain the impossible. "Jake, we didn't mean to hurt you. We've always loved you both equally." Jake couldn't hold back his sarcasm. "Oh, really? Equal love? That's why I've been the one paying your bills, fixing the house, buying groceries, and Eric has done nothing. But sure, you love us equally." She seemed taken aback, as if she hadn't expected Jake to call her out so directly. Her shoulders slumped, and her gaze dropped to the floor. "We just wanted to make sure Eric's taken care of. He's been struggling, and we thought." Jake's stomach twisted. The words, "he's been struggling," echoed in his mind, a weak excuse for years of enabling Eric's laziness. His mom wasn't even seeing the real issue here. It wasn't about whether Eric was struggling or not. It was about fairness, about respect. And it seemed like that was the one thing his parents had refused to give him. "Why didn't you think about me for once?" Jake finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper but thick with emotion. "I've been the one making sure you didn't lose the house, making sure everything was taken care of. And you're telling me Eric deserves all of it?" His mom let out a shaky breath. "Jake, we didn't want to hurt you. You're successful, you're independent, you'll be fine without it." "Fine?" Jake snapped, his anger rising again. "I didn't do all that for fine. I did it because I love you. I did it because I wanted to help, because I'm your son. But apparently, I'm nothing more than a backup plan to you." There was a long pause, and for the first time, Jake could see the guilt flicker in his mother's eyes. But it didn't last long. She turned to his dad for support, but he just stood there, silent and distant, as if hoping Jake would drop it. "No," Jake said, shaking his head slowly. "I'm done. I'm done being the one who fixes everything while Eric gets a free ride. I'm done being your safety net." His mother's face faltered, but she didn't argue. She just looked at Jake, then glanced at his father, waiting for him to step in. But Jake knew it was pointless. There was nothing left to say. Jake stood up and walked toward the door. His hand hovered over the handle for a second as he looked at them, taking in their silent disappointment. The weight of everything was finally sinking in. He was walking away, and there was no going back. "I'm done," Jake said firmly, turning the door handle and walking out of the house. "You made your choice. Now I'll make mine." He slammed the door behind him, the sound reverberating through the house. It was final. There was no turning back now. Jake didn't know what came next, but one thing was clear, he wasn't going to let them manipulate him anymore. The silence stretched out over the next 2 weeks, with Jake refusing to reach out to them. He didn't respond to their calls, didn't visit. He let them handle their own problems for the first time in years. In those 2 weeks, he found a strange sense of peace. The anger hadn't gone away, but it had started to settle into something more manageable. Something more like acceptance. The moment he'd walked out of their house, he had taken control of his life again, but that peace wouldn't last long. The silence in the following weeks was almost suffocating, and Jake could feel his decision weighing heavily on him. He wasn't used to being silent with his family. For years, he had been the one who picked up the pieces when things went wrong, the one who made sure they never had to face the consequences of their own actions. But now, he was standing firm, making a decision that felt right but also painful. He didn't know if he had made the right choice yet, but he had done what he needed to do. 2 weeks passed with no word from his parents, and he had begun to think maybe they'd finally realized their mistake. Maybe they'd come to their senses and see that what they had done was wrong. But deep down, Jake knew he was fooling himself. His parents hadn't changed. They had never been the kind of people who owned up to their mistakes. They'd always been good at sweeping things under the rug, ignoring the truth when it was too inconvenient to face. Then came the text. It was from his dad. The property taxes are due. Jake stared at the screen for a moment, reading the message over and over, trying to make sense of it. No, hey, how have you been, or, sorry for what happened. No acknowledgement of the past 2 weeks of silence. It was just a cold, transactional message. It was like he was still just the family bank account, the ATM that they could withdraw from when they needed it. He couldn't help but chuckle bitterly to himself. This was what it had come down to, his dad texting him about property taxes. Like nothing had changed. Like everything was still the same. Like Jake was still the one who had to fix everything. Jake didn't waste any time. His fingers moved quickly over the screen as he typed out his response. I'm sure Eric will handle it since the house is his and all. It took 5 minutes for his dad to reply, and by then, Jake had already known what was coming. His dad didn't waste time with niceties. He didn't try to appeal to Jake's sense of guilt or reason. Instead, he just sent a message that was as blunt as it was transactional. But his mom wasn't done. Her text came a few minutes later, a little more desperate, a little more manipulative. Jake, please don't be like this. We need to talk. It was the same thing again, expecting Jake to just roll over and go back to doing what he had always done. As if nothing had changed, Jake didn't respond right away. He let the text sit, reading it over a few times, thinking. He knew what they were trying to do. They wanted him to feel guilty, to cave under the pressure of their expectations. They didn't care about him, they just cared about his money, his help. That was all they had ever wanted from him. An hour passed before Jake finally typed his response. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. Now you can live with it. He set his phone down, the words feeling final, like a weight had been lifted from his chest. He was done. There was no going back. His parents had chosen Eric, and now they would have to face the consequences of that choice. But of course, that wasn't the end of it. Just when Jake thought he had made his point, Eric decided to step in. His text came late in the evening, and when Jake saw the notification, he already knew it was going to be obnoxious. Eric never had anything meaningful to say, just complaints and entitlement. Dude, why are you being such a drama queen? It's not a big deal. Just help them out like you always do. Jake could hardly believe what he was reading. Eric was still playing the victim, acting like Jake was the one being unreasonable. It was so typical of him. Jake's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. The temptation to let the rage flow through him was strong, but he held it in check. Instead, he typed out a simple reply. No, I think you've got it covered since you're the favorite and all. It took only a few minutes before Eric responded, his text dripping with the same entitlement Jake had grown so tired of. Oh my God, are you seriously mad about the will? Grow up, man. It's just money. Jake's jaw clenched, his teeth grinding in frustration. The hypocrisy was astounding. Eric had spent his entire life doing nothing, and now that everything was handed to him, he was brushing it off as just money. Jake shot back a response before he could stop himself. Then you won't mind using some of that money to pay for the mortgage, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could feel the satisfaction of having hit the mark, but he wasn't done. Not yet. A few minutes later, his mom texted him again, her tone now shifting into full guilt trip mode. Jake, we're your parents. Family takes care of each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're just abandoning us. Jake's blood boiled. He could hardly believe his ears. They had spent years manipulating him, using him as their crutch, and now they were calling him selfish. He had given them everything. His time, his money, his energy. And now, when he needed a little respect, they were playing the victim, taking a deep breath. Jake typed his reply, his fingers moving slowly as he chose each word carefully. You made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Now Eric can take care of you. The message was short, but it felt like a punch in the gut. Jake could imagine his mom's reaction, her face flushed with anger and confusion. She always had a flair for turning everything into a drama, but it wasn't just his mom anymore. His dad stepped in again, with another text that only made Jake laugh. "We're not asking for much. Just enough to cover the mortgage for a few more months until we figure things out. Don't be selfish." Jake's laughter was cold, bitter. "Selfish," he repeated to himself. "After everything I've done for them, I'm the selfish one?" But there it was. The same old manipulation. The same tired excuse. And this time, Jake wasn't falling for it. "No. I'm done," he typed simply. He hit send and put his phone down, the finality of it all settling over him like a weight he could breathe through. They had made their choice. Now, they could deal with the consequences. Jake thought he had made his point, but as the days went by, his family's persistence seemed to know no bounds. He had made his decision, and he was ready to move forward without them. But they weren't ready to let go, not by a long shot. The guilt trips, the constant messages, the manipulation, they just wouldn't stop. It was a regular Tuesday when it happened. Jake was at work, trying to focus on his tasks and keep his mind off everything that had transpired. He had made the choice to put his family behind him, at least for now, and work on rebuilding his own life. He had even started to feel a sense of relief in the space he had created for himself, away from the toxic expectations that had plagued him for so long. Then came the call. It was from the front desk of his apartment complex. He had never received a call from them during work hours, so his stomach twisted with unease. "Hey Jake, your parents are here," the receptionist said, her voice hesitant. "They're saying it's an emergency, and they're insisting that you come down." Jake's heart skipped a beat. His immediate reaction was disbelief. They're here? After everything that had happened? After he had clearly told them to leave him alone? His mind raced, trying to process what was going on. How could they just show up uninvited, like nothing had happened? "Don't let them up," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not expecting them. Don't let them come up." The receptionist paused for a moment. "Well, they're kind of pushing for it. They're really insistent." Jake felt his frustration spike. His parents had no boundaries, no respect for his decisions, and no understanding of what he had gone through. They still saw him as their personal problem solver, their wallet, the one who would always be there to bail them out when they were in trouble. He wasn't playing that role anymore, no matter how hard they tried to pull him back in. "I don't care," Jake said firmly. "Let them leave." A few moments of silence followed, but then the receptionist hesitated again. "They're not leaving, Jake. They're downstairs right now." He hung up, his mind spinning. He didn't want to deal with them. He didn't want to face the drama, the manipulation, the guilt. But they weren't giving him a choice. They had crossed a line by showing up at his apartment, completely disregarding his wishes. Without thinking twice, Jake grabbed his keys and stormed down the stairs. His blood was boiling with each step, his chest tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. How could they think this was okay? How could they think they had the right to just walk into his life like this? When he reached the lobby, he spotted them immediately, his mom, dad, and Eric, standing in a tight formation near the front door like they had planned some kind of family intervention. His mom had her arms crossed, looking disappointed, like she had been rehearsing her lines for this moment. His dad stood stiffly beside her, his expression a mixture of frustration and entitlement, as if he couldn't believe Jake had the audacity to stand up for himself. And Eric, well, Eric was just standing there, looking bored, like he didn't even care about any of this. The man who had been given everything was now acting like none of it mattered. Jake's anger bubbled over. This wasn't just about the will anymore. This was about the years of manipulation, the constant undermining of his worth, the never-ending expectation that he would be there to fix their problems. He yanked the door open, standing tall as he looked at them. His mom was the first to speak, of course. Her voice was full of drama, the way it always had been when she was trying to control the situation. "Jake, finally. We need to talk," she said, her tone overly sweet, like she was trying to charm him into submission. Jake's gaze hardened. "No. You need to leave." His mom blinked, clearly caught off guard by his response. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Jake said, his voice cool and unwavering. "You don't get to show up at my apartment uninvited and demand anything from me. Not anymore." His dad stepped forward, the anger now evident on his face. "Jake, really? After everything we've done for you, you're going to let us lose the house over some petty grudge?" Jake couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, mocking sound that filled the space between them. "Petty grudge," he echoed. "You've been treating me like a tool for years, and now I'm supposed to feel guilty?" His mom gasped, clutching her chest in a show of exaggerated shock. "Jake, that's not fair. We've only ever done what we thought was best for the family." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Best for the family? You mean best for Eric? Just say it." There was a long, tense pause, and for a moment, no one said anything. Then Eric, the last person Jake had expected to speak up, finally chimed in, his voice dripping with indifference. "Look, man," Eric said, shrugging nonchalantly. "I didn't ask for any of this. I don't want to be involved in your drama." Jake turned to him, his voice sharp. "You don't want to be involved? You've never wanted to be involved, Eric. You've been sitting back, letting mom and dad do everything for you, and now you expect me to clean up your mess?" Eric's face flushed with anger, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, looking anywhere but at Jake. It was like Jake had just stripped away the last bit of Eric's self-righteousness, and for a second, he looked embarrassed, but Jake wasn't done. He had spent years letting them walk all over him, and now, finally, it was his turn to set the record straight. Turning back to his parents, Jake spoke again, his voice low and controlled. "You've made your choice. You've enabled Eric's laziness for years. Now you can live with it." His mom's face twisted with confusion, trying to grasp the reality of what Jake was saying. She opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. "I'm done," Jake said firmly. "You've shown me exactly who you are, and I don't need any part of it anymore." With that, he turned on his heel and walked back into his apartment, slamming the door behind him. He could hear his parents protesting outside, but he didn't care anymore. He wasn't going to be manipulated by them ever again, Jake thought. The worst was behind him. After the confrontation at his apartment, he was certain that his parents would take the hint and stop trying to manipulate him. He had made it crystal clear that he was done being their financial safety net, and now, it was time for him to move on with his life. But of course, his family had other ideas. The very next day, Jake received a request that took him by complete surprise. It wasn't a phone call or another guilt-tripped text message. This time, it was something much more direct. Something that seemed almost shameless in its audacity. A bank transfer request. The notification on his phone made Jake's heart skip a beat. He stared at the screen, almost in disbelief. His mom had sent him a request for money, asking him to cover their overdue mortgage. The amount? $3,500. Jake blinked and read the request again. He couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, after he had made it clear that he wasn't going to keep supporting them, they still had the audacity to ask him for money. No explanation. No apology. Just a cold, transactional request, as though nothing had changed. The nerve of Jake felt his blood pressure rise as he sat there, his phone in his hand. He had just been through all of this, the confrontation, the insults, the manipulation, and now they were back at it again, treating him like an ATM. As if he hadn't stood up for himself at all. Without hesitation, Jake tapped the screen and declined the request. It felt like a small victory, but it wasn't enough. His parents thought they could just force him back into his old role, and he wasn't having it. Not anymore. A few minutes later, his phone rang. It was his mom, of course. He didn't answer. He wasn't ready to hear the guilt-tripping, the pleading, the endless manipulation. She had crossed the line one too many times, and now it was his turn to stand firm. The text started coming through almost immediately after the call ended. "Jake, I know you saw the request. Why did you decline it?" The tone was polite, almost pleading, as though they were trying to convince him that it was all just a small favor they were asking for. But Jake wasn't buying it. He took a deep breath, thinking for a moment, and then responded with the truth. "Because it's not my responsibility." It didn't take long before another message came through. This time, it was his mom again, only now she was shifting the narrative. Her tone was more urgent, more desperate. "We're going to lose the house if you don't help us." Jake almost laughed at the irony. Now it was an emergency. Now that their comfortable world was falling apart, they were acting like he was the only one who could save them. After years of treating him like an afterthought, now they were playing the "we're family" card. He was done. He had done enough. "I'm sure Eric will figure it out," Jake typed back. After all, the house is his now. For a brief moment, Jake felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was his life now. He was no longer bound to the expectations of his family. He didn't have to feel guilty for choosing himself, for drawing the line, but it wasn't over yet. Of course, Eric couldn't stay out of it. The next text came from him in the evening, and Jake could already hear the entitlement in Eric's words before even reading them. "Dude, just send them the money already. You're making this a bigger deal than it is." Jake rolled his eyes. Eric hadn't changed. After all these years of taking everything for granted, Eric was still trying to guilt him into fixing everything. He didn't hesitate. His response was quick and sharp. "No, I think you've got it covered. Since you're the favorite and all." It took a few minutes before Eric replied, and when he did, it was just as predictable as ever. "Oh my God, are you seriously mad about the will? Grow up, man. It's just money." Jake's blood boiled. Just money? That was the same excuse they had been using all along. acting like the money was the only thing that mattered. But it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. It was about standing up for himself. Then you won't mind using some of that money to pay for the mortgage, right? Jake shot back. For the first time, Eric didn't respond right away. Jake could almost hear the gears turning in his brother's head. Eric had always been the one who benefited from their parents' generosity, but now that he was being asked to take responsibility, he was suddenly silent. It wasn't long before his mom texted again. This time, the manipulation was in full force. Jake, we're your parents. Family takes care of each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're just abandoning us. Jake's fists clenched. He could feel the anger rising again, threatening to spill over. Abandoning them? He had been the one to support them for years, sacrificing his time, his energy, and his money, and now they were calling him selfish. This was it. This was where he drew the line. I've already done enough for you, Jake typed slowly, letting each word sink in. You made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Now Eric can take care of you. He hit send and set the phone down, but of course, the drama didn't end there. His parents were relentless. Not long after, Jake's phone buzzed with another message, this time from his dad. Jake, you really going to let your parents become homeless? The text read. Jake couldn't help but laugh out loud at the absurdity of it all. Homeless? His parents weren't going to be homeless. They weren't about to lose the house. This was just another attempt to manipulate him into giving in. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned off his phone, his mind made up. He had nothing left to say. To them. They had crossed the line, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions. The following day, Jake's phone remained quiet. For a brief moment, he thought that perhaps his family had finally gotten the message. Maybe they would stop trying to manipulate him. Maybe they would stop using guilt and emotional pressure to try and drag him back into their web, but Jake knew better than to believe that for long. Sure enough, the next morning brought a surprise he hadn't expected. He had just finished his coffee, getting ready for work, when he received a notification that made his stomach twist. It was a notification from Facebook. At first, he thought it was just another message from a distant relative or an old friend. But as he opened the app and began scrolling through his feed, his heart sank. His parents had taken their grievances online, and they weren't holding back. The first post he saw was from his mom. She had gone public with her feelings, her message aimed directly at him. Jake could practically hear her voice as he read the words on the screen. I didn't raise my son to be selfish. True family helps each other, no matter what. I am so disappointed in you, Jake. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You have no idea what it means to love and care for your parents. Jake stared at the post for a long moment, his fingers gripping the phone tightly. How dare she? After everything he had done for them, after years of supporting them emotionally and financially, this was how she was portraying him? As if he was the one who had abandoned them. He scrolled down, his stomach sinking further as he saw the comments. A few of her friends had chimed in, supporting her and agreeing with her sentiments. How could he be so cruel? One of them commented. Family is everything. You're a good mother, another wrote. Jake should be ashamed of himself. Jake could feel his anger building. This was low. His mother, who had once claimed to love him, was now trying to turn everyone against him. She was painting him as the villain in a story he never asked to be a part of. He wasn't going to let it slide. Just as he was about to turn off his phone, his father made his entrance into the online drama. His post was no less dramatic than his wife's. Some people don't understand what it means to be a family, he wrote. We gave everything to our children, and now this is how we're repaid. My son should be helping us in our golden years, but instead, he's choosing to turn his back on us. The post was tagged with a passive-aggressive addition. I hope you're happy with your choices, Jake. The message was clear. His parents were trying to rewrite history, casting themselves as the ones who had been wronged, while making Jake look like the one who had chosen to walk away from everything that mattered. And then came the real kicker. Eric, of course, couldn't let the opportunity pass by. His post was dripping with fake sympathy and passive-aggressive commentary. I do anything for my parents, Eric wrote, but some people think family is just about money. I've always been there for my family, but some people are too selfish to understand what it really means. He ended his post with a thinly veiled jab at Jake. I wish some people would learn what it really means to be family. Love, respect, and sacrifice. Jake felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about money. It was never about money. This was about respect. But his family was so deep in denial, so blinded by their own sense of entitlement, that they couldn't even see it. Jake closed his phone, his mind racing. How could they do this? How could they twist everything around like this? He felt the anger rising in his chest again. He had spent years being the one to support them, the one who was always there when they needed him. But now, when he was finally standing up for himself, they had turned on him completely. He couldn't let this go. He had to set the record straight. He wasn't going to let his family make him the villain. With a deep breath, Jake grabbed his phone again. He opened his own Facebook account, the one he used for close friends and family, those who actually knew the truth about his situation. He wasn't going to engage in petty back and forths. He wasn't going to get into the mud with them. But he was going to tell the truth. He began typing. "I know I've been quiet for the past couple of days," Jake wrote, his fingers moving steadily over the keys. "But I can't stay quiet any longer. My family has been sharing a lot of things online about me that are simply not true. They've portrayed me as the villain, the selfish one who refuses to help my parents in their time of need. I'm here to set the record straight." Jake paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the screen. He wasn't going to sugarcoat this. He wasn't going to hold back. It was time to tell the truth. "I've always helped my family," Jake continued. "From the moment I could get a job, I've been the one helping with bills, paying for groceries, and supporting them in every way I could. But there comes a point where you can't keep giving without being respected. Over the years, I've watched my parents favor Eric, giving him everything, the house, the money, the attention, while I was expected to just keep giving without ever being considered as equal. I'm sure some of you might be reading this and thinking, well, that's just how family works, but here's the truth. Family should be a two-way street." Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, each word more cathartic than the last. "When I found out that my parents left everything to Eric in their will, I realized how one-sided this entire relationship had been. They didn't even consider me, not even for a moment. They've made it clear that I'm just the one they can count on when things get rough, but never the one they actually want around unless it's convenient for them." He paused again. He was finally putting his feelings into words, and it felt like a weight was lifting from his shoulders. "For years, I've been the one funding their lifestyle. I've paid for vacations, chipped in for bills, and even helped out with things like house taxes. And for what? To be treated like a backup plan? I'm done. I'm not just some wallet they can pull money from whenever they need it. I'm a human being, and I deserve respect." Jake felt a deep sense of clarity as he finished typing his post. As for Eric, it's time for him to grow up. He's 28 years old and he's never worked a day in his life. He's never taken responsibility for anything. My parents have enabled him for so long that it's no surprise he's the one they favor. But here's the thing, he's had plenty of time to get his life together, and now it's time for him to stand on his own 2 feet. Jake sat back, staring at the screen for a moment. He felt oddly liberated. "To everyone who's been following this drama and supporting my parents, you need to understand that there's always 2 sides to every story. Yes, family is important, but it's also about mutual respect. I've given enough for a lifetime, and I'm not apologizing for taking a step back. This is not me turning my back on family. This is me finally choosing myself." Jake took a deep breath and hit post. Jake didn't expect much when he posted his message online. He knew that his family would try to twist things, to make him the villain in their narrative. But what he didn't expect was the flood of support that came pouring in after he shared his side of the story. At first, it was just a trickle. A few friends from work, some old acquaintances, and a couple of cousins who knew what had been going on for years. But as the hours passed, the messages kept coming, each one reinforcing his decision. The comments, the texts, the private messages, they all had one common theme: support. He had no idea how many people were actually aware of the dysfunction in his family. How many people knew about his years of sacrifice and how much he had given to his parents, only to be taken for granted. One of his cousins, someone he hadn't talked to in years, sent him a message: "Jake, I've been following all of this. And I just want to say, I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You've always been the one taking care of them, and it's time they realized that. You deserve better." Another friend wrote, "I've been where you are, and it's tough to walk away, but trust me, it's the right choice. No one should ever use family as a reason to mistreat you. You're doing what's best for you." Jake stared at his phone, a sense of relief washing over him as he read each message. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. People understood him. They saw the years of work, the emotional toll, and the years of sacrifice he had given without ever receiving anything in return. But there was still a nagging thought in the back of his mind: the backlash from his family. He knew it would come. He knew they would twist things and try to manipulate the situation. It wasn't about to get any easier, and then, just as Jake started to feel a little bit of peace, his phone buzzed again. The text was from Eric. The message was blunt: "You really had to post all that on Facebook, huh? You aired our dirty laundry for the whole world to see." Jake's thumb hovered over the screen, considering how to respond. The sheer audacity of his brother to act like he was the victim in all this, it was almost laughable. Jake typed back, Maybe you should have thought about that before mom and dad left everything to you and not even considered me. But go ahead. Keep playing the victim. You've had enough handouts in your life to last a lifetime. Eric's response came swiftly, as usual, filled with that same sense of entitlement. I didn't ask for any of this, okay? Stop acting like I'm the problem. I didn't ask for mom and dad to treat me differently. Jake let out a deep breath, feeling his anger start to rise again. Eric was just as self-absorbed as their parents, and now he was trying to make Jake the one at fault. It was exhausting. Jake put his phone down for a moment, trying to collect himself. But the truth was, he didn't need to engage with Eric. He had already made it clear that he was done. If Eric didn't understand that, it wasn't his problem. Just as Jake was about to go about his day, another text came through. This one wasn't from Eric, but from his dad. Jake opened the message, his heart sinking. The text was short, but it hit him harder than he expected. We didn't raise you to be this way, Jake. You're turning your back on your family when we need you the most. You're going to regret this. The words stung. They hit him deep in the chest. His father had always been the one who told him to do the right thing, to help out family when they need it. But now, when Jake was finally doing what was right for himself, he was being vilified. Jake stared at the screen, his emotions swirling. But as he read the message again, something inside him clicked. Regret this? No, he wouldn't. He wasn't going to go back to being the person who sacrificed everything for others only to be thrown aside when it mattered. He took a deep breath and, with a calmness that surprised him, he replied, I'm not turning my back on anyone, Dad. I'm just choosing not to be your safety net anymore. You and Mom made your choice, and now Eric can take care of you. Jake pressed send and then, without giving it another thought, he turned off his phone. He needed to stop letting this situation consume him. The constant barrage of guilt trips, the manipulation, and the guilt-shaming, they weren't his problems anymore. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, freedom. He wasn't a backup plan, a financial tool, or an afterthought. He was finally free from the expectations that had weighed him down for so long. The day passed quietly. No more texts. No more phone calls. No more messages from Eric or his parents. It was like the silence had settled in, thick and suffocating, and Jake embraced it. The silence in Jake's life continued for the next few days. At first, it was a relief, a much-needed break from the emotional storm he had been navigating for weeks. But soon, the silence became deafening. Every time he picked up his phone, his mind would race to the thought of what his family might be doing, how they were probably still trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage. Jake had stopped checking his Facebook as frequently, but every so often, curiosity got the better of him. And when he did check, he was never disappointed by the level of drama his family managed to stir up. His parents were relentless in posting thinly veiled insults, all the while positioning themselves as the long-suffering parents who only wanted what was best for their children. They painted Jake as the villain, as if he were the one who had abandoned them, rather than the other way around. It was the usual emotional manipulation, and at first, Jake let it slide. But then came a message from his aunt, someone he had always respected and looked up to, one that shook him. I'm so sorry for what you're going through, Jake. I know how much you've done for your parents, and I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. Your parents might be making a mistake, but I know you're doing what's best for you. Jake sat there, staring at his phone for a while. He hadn't expected that kind of support. It was a reminder that, despite how twisted things had become, he wasn't entirely alone. But as he continued scrolling through his messages, another text came through, this one from his brother. Jake, stop with the nonsense. You've got to stop making everything harder than it needs to be. Just let it go already. We're family. Jake's stomach churned. Eric's words were always wrapped in a layer of entitlement, but this one hit a nerve. How could Eric just brush everything off like it didn't matter? How could he continue to act like none of this was his fault? Jake's hands trembled as he typed his reply. Family? Is that really how you see it? You never had to carry the weight. You never had to sacrifice anything. You were never treated like an equal. I'm tired of being the one who gets nothing while you take everything. That's not family. It's manipulation. He hit send and then slammed his phone down. It wasn't worth engaging with Eric any longer. The truth was, he had already said everything he needed to say, but the emotional toll it took on him was undeniable. He had done the right thing, but it didn't make the process any easier. The guilt, the anger, the frustration, sometimes it all felt like too much. There were moments when Jake found himself questioning everything. Was he making a mistake? Was he being too harsh? But deep down, he knew the answer. He had done nothing wrong. It wasn't selfish to stand up for himself. It wasn't wrong to want respect. He had spent years giving everything to his family, and in return, they had taken him for granted. His parents had made their choice, and now it was his turn to make his. Jake took a deep breath and pushed those feelings aside. He wasn't going to let his family control his life any longer. He was done being their emotional punching bag. It was time for him to live for himself, to move forward. A few days later, Jake was sitting at his desk at work when his phone buzzed again. He had hoped for a few days of peace, but that wasn't the reality of his situation. This time, it wasn't from his parents or Eric, but from one of his close friends. David, Jake, I saw the post. Man, I just want to tell you, you're doing the right thing. You don't owe them anything. I know it must be hard, but you've got to let go of the past and move forward. Jake smiled at the text. It was exactly what he needed to hear. There were people who cared about him, who understood what he was going through. And that support made all the difference. The next few days passed without incident. The texts from his parents and Eric slowed down, though the guilt trips still lingered in their social media posts. But Jake didn't engage with them anymore. The emotional toll of the past few weeks had drained him enough that he was starting to realize that his family's toxicity was something he didn't have to carry. He had spent years being the good son, always doing what was expected of him, always giving more than he received. But that wasn't sustainable. It was time for him to prioritize himself, his happiness, and his peace of mind. One evening, as Jake sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone, he came across a post from his mom that almost made him laugh. She had shared a photo of the family from a holiday years ago, with the caption, "Family is everything. You don't know what you've got until it's gone." Jake's heart twisted for a second, but he quickly shook it off. It was more of the same, more manipulation, more attempts to make him feel guilty for standing up for himself. But this time, it didn't work. Jake wasn't the one who had abandoned his family. He wasn't the one who had shut him out. The ones who had abandoned him were the ones who had decided that Eric's comfort and laziness mattered more than Jake's hard work, his sacrifices, and his selflessness. It was time to let go of the guilt. It was time to let go of the anger. It was time to heal. A week passed, and Jake was beginning to find peace in the chaos. His family's relentless attempts to pull him back had slowed, but the emotional damage was still there. There were times when he found himself staring at his phone, tempted to check if they had reached out again, if there were any new posts calling him selfish or accusatory. But he was done. He wasn't going to fall back into that cycle. Jake had been keeping to himself more, focusing on work, catching up on personal projects, and even spending more time with friends who didn't come with strings attached. He was starting to remember what it felt like to live for himself again, not just as a tool for his family's convenience. But then, the unexpected happened. Jake was sitting in his favorite cafe one afternoon when his phone buzzed. He was in the middle of reading a message from a friend when he saw the name that made his stomach drop, his mom. He hesitated for a moment, but the curiosity was too much. Jake opened the message, bracing himself for yet another guilt trip. But this one was different. The message was short, and there were no accusations or demands. His mom wrote, "Jake, I know we've done a lot of things wrong, and I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this way. I don't know what to say, but I just wanted to tell you that I miss you. I hope you're doing okay." Jake stared at the message for a long time. He wasn't sure how to feel. A part of him wanted to respond immediately, to let her know how hurt he had been, to remind her of all the years of sacrifices he made that were never acknowledged. But another part of him, a quieter part, wanted to leave the door open, just a crack, for reconciliation. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still a chance to heal. But no. He couldn't ignore the years of pain and betrayal. He couldn't ignore how, for so long, he had been used and discarded. There had been no appreciation, no recognition for everything he did. And now, after all the manipulation and mistreatment, she was apologizing? Was it just a guilt-driven response to the fallout, or did she truly understand the damage that had been done? Jake set his phone down, the weight of the message sinking in. He wasn't ready to let it all go yet. Not when everything still felt so raw. The wounds were too fresh. He took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. It wasn't the first time he'd felt torn between family loyalty and self-preservation. For years, he had tried to balance both, giving more than he received in hopes of gaining their approval, their love. But it never worked. He had been discarded like a tool, only used when needed, only valued when his help was required, and now, after all that, she expected him to forget the past and just come back. Jake knew better. The pattern hadn't changed. His mom's apology was just another attempt to pull him back into the role of the good son, without taking any real responsibility for her actions. She was sorry, but was she really sorry? Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was from his dad. "Jake, I've been thinking a lot about everything. We made a mistake, and I'm sorry. We should have treated you better, and I know that now. Can we talk?" Jake's heart sank. Was this what they were doing now? Was this their version of accountability? They had already made it clear that Eric was the one who mattered, and now that their golden child was going to inherit everything. Suddenly they were sorry. The audacity of it all made Jake's blood boil. His dad had never admitted that he was wrong. He had always put the blame on Jake, expecting him to just comply, to be the obedient son who didn't question their decisions. And now, after everything, they were trying to rewrite the narrative? Trying to play the role of regretful parents who just wanted to make things right. Jake clenched his fists, feeling the familiar anger rise up inside him. But this time, it wasn't going to control him. He had already made his decision. He wasn't going to fall into the trap of their manipulation anymore. It was time for him to focus on the life he had worked so hard to build. Without them. He typed a quick response to his dad. I'm not sure what you expect from me. I'm done being your backup plan, done being your ATM. I've made my choice, and I'm not going to keep going in circles. I've done enough. I'm choosing myself now. Jake hit send, took a deep breath, and set his phone down again. For the first time in his life, he wasn't waiting for approval. He wasn't waiting for their validation. He had freed himself from their toxic grip. The message had been delivered, loud and clear. Now, it was time for him to heal. He stood up from his table, took a final sip of his coffee, and walked out of the cafe, stepping into the bright sunlight. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was stepping into a new chapter. A chapter that was his own, free from the weight of his family's expectations. The days that followed felt strangely light, as though a weight had been lifted from Jake's shoulders. At work, his productivity skyrocketed. He was focused. He wasn't distracted by the constant barrage of texts and guilt trips from his family. For the first time in years, Jake was actually living for himself, but despite the relief, there was still a lingering sense of unease. The truth was, Jake didn't like being at odds with his family. He didn't want to be the bad guy. He had spent so much of his life trying to be the perfect son, the dependable one, always there when they needed him. But now, that same family was the one he had to walk away from. The guilt still crept in during the quiet moments, gnawing at him, making him question if he had made the right choice. He took a deep breath, letting it out slowly, and reminded himself why he had done it. His entire life, he had been treated like a fallback plan. He had been the one who held everything together, yet when it came down to the most important things, the things that truly mattered, he had been overlooked. He had been invisible, his efforts taken for granted. And he was tired of it, but that didn't make the reality of walking away from family any easier. One evening, while Jake was cooking dinner in his apartment, his phone buzzed again. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, but then decided to check it. It was a message from his mom. I just want you to know that I miss you. This isn't easy for me either, but I don't know how else to make things right. I want us to fix this, Jake. Please. Jake stood frozen for a moment, staring at the words. He couldn't ignore the familiar tug of guilt in his chest. He didn't want to be the one who refused to forgive. He didn't want to be the one who had closed the door completely. But then he remembered the countless times he had bent over backward for them, the years of feeling undervalued, the realization that they had never truly seen him for who he was. Jake took a deep breath. He didn't have to respond right away. He didn't owe anyone an instant reply. He wasn't going to make this decision based on the emotions of the moment. He needed to be sure. After a long pause, he typed back, his fingers moving with careful consideration. I'm not ready to fix things yet. I need time, and I need to think about what I want, not just what you or Dad want. I need to take care of myself for once. He sent the message and put his phone down, the room feeling eerily quiet. His heart raced for a few moments as the weight of his decision settled over him. But this time, there was no regret. No doubt. This was the right choice. He had to stop being the person who gave everything and got nothing in return. As the days passed, Jake continued to focus on rebuilding his life. He spent more time doing the things that made him happy. He rediscovered hobbies he had long since abandoned. He reconnected with friends who had supported him through thick and thin. And slowly, he began to realize something important. He was worthy of love and respect. He didn't have to earn it through endless sacrifice. One weekend, Jake found himself at a local park, enjoying the fresh air and the warm sunlight. He sat on a bench, taking in the peaceful surroundings, when his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from his parents or Eric. It was a message from his closest friend, David. Hey. Man, just wanted to check in on you. How's everything going? Jake smiled to himself. David had been one of the few constants in his life who never expected anything from him. There were no strings attached, no manipulation, just genuine friendship. Jake typed back, I'm good. Actually, I'm better than I've been in a long time. I'm finally putting myself first. David's reply came almost instantly, that's awesome, man. You deserve it. Jake sat there for a while longer, soaking in the simple pleasure of that moment. No drama, no guilt, no manipulation. Just peace. It was then that Jake realized that, even though the fallout from his family had been difficult, it had been necessary. It had been his moment of breaking free. And with each passing day, it became clearer that the choice he made wasn't just about cutting ties with them. It was about choosing himself. The more Jake reflected, the more he understood that family wasn't just about blood relations. Family was about respect, love, and mutual care. He had spent years sacrificing his own happiness to keep the peace, to make sure everyone else was comfortable. But in the end, that wasn't what made a family. A family didn't take advantage of one person while leaving them behind when things got tough. Jake had learned to build his own family. One that respected him, valued him, and gave as much as they took. The phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't a message from his parents. It was a simple notification from Facebook. His post had received more reactions, more support, than he had expected. It made Jake smile. For once, the right people were in his corner. And he knew that, no matter what came next, he was going to be okay.